This program contains dramatizations of real people and events. Some names have been changed. This program is for mature audiences only. It contains graphic images which may be disturbing to some viewers. Viewer discretion is advised. In the Midwest, a young man disappears. His loved ones terrorized. The family calls in a pair of psychics, hoping they can help.
I don't think a family could be in any more pain. You could not be around these people and not cry.
In Pennsylvania, one friend kills another. The gunman on the run. Police get a surprise call from a psychic.
I could see the structure where he was killed. I just remember being terrified, just like any nightmare. You're just terrified.
When clues are scarce and answers elusive, investigators sometimes turn to a psychic witness. In a small town in the American Midwest, on the afternoon of June 4th, 1994, 22-year-old Jamie Apaku hangs out with a friend. Jamie comes from a close-knit family, but he recently fell in with a dangerous crowd and began trafficking in narcotics. Later that day, Jamie's father learns his son missed an important appointment. It's only been a few hours. But given Jamie's new lifestyle, his father's already worried. About the same time, a few miles away, terror for the family of Jamie's fiancée. The men demand the drug money. The family doesn't understand. There is no money. Hours later, Jamie's fiancée returns home.
Mom! Mom! Mom? Oh no, that's me. You didn't go to the house up.
The victims are still in shock and recall what they can about the attack to Detective Dan Evans.
They indicated that as soon as the suspects forced their way in, they immediately began to demand to know where money was. They made reference to her future son-in-law. Said, where does he keep his money? She tried to explain to them that this wasn't his residence and that he didn't keep anything there.
The children are too traumatized to remember details of the attackers.
They had difficulty giving height and weight and specifics. This is legitimately the most horrific scenario you could describe a child going through. You can't help it. You still think, what if that child was mine? It's a great motivation to find out what happened and bring these people to justice.
Officers look for witnesses and find neighbors who saw Jamie's car, but it wasn't Jamie inside.
They saw two suspicious subjects walking, but none of the people I spoke to obtained a tag number. The neighbor's description of the suspicious subject seen leaving the residence didn't match the description of the future son-in-law.
Jamie's disappearance might be linked to the home invasion, but no one knows how. Then, 2 days later, a friend spots Jamie's car in the parking lot of a grocery store. He knows Jamie's missing and calls it in. Police process the car, but find no fingerprints or other evidence inside.
The absence of fingerprints indicates that very likely this was part of a premeditated act. That very likely the person who dropped this car off there had enough forethought to either wear gloves or enough afterthought to wipe the fingerprints clean from all the flat surfaces.
Detective Pam Garrick takes on the case.
I had a missing person report, and we had a vehicle that had been found. We'd had a home invasion where the vehicle had been seen at, and people asking, where's his money? I thought, this is not one of these that someone got tired of their home life and they decide just to walk away for a day or two. Any type of investigation like this where you've got a missing person, you start with those closer to the person and work outwards. It's like a circle that has ripples in it.
Finding answers will be tough in a world where no one trusts the cops.
When you go to talk to some of the friends, if they have drug involvements, they don't want to talk. They don't want to give you information.
My fingers, I can get one. Now, will you cooperate with me?
I try to be straight with them.
Last time you said.
Look, right now, I'm not interested in what you're doing, your business.
That's all I know.
I'm interested in this, and this one thing only. I'm interested in finding the missing person. If you have any information, I'd like to have it.
Take a minute.
But it's slow going. Most of Jamie's street contacts claim no knowledge of anything.
It was always just part of the truth. I'd go to follow up on a lead, and then it would just dissolve. It would just be nothing.
2 full weeks after the disappearance and home invasion, police still have no solid leads. Jamie's family does their best, offering a $5,000 reward. It generates a lot of calls, but nothing concrete. Police keep up the pressure, letting the players in the local drug scene know that they're not going away. Slowly, they get bits and pieces. Word is that someone killed Jamie, and there might be a West Coast gang connection.
I conducted 30 or 40 interviews over an extended period of time. There was some reference to gang member involvement in this incident. How much merit it had, I had no way of knowing.
Detectives also learn of local tension. Some say Jamie had trouble with an area drug dealer named Damian Remick.
Supposedly, Remick had owed a large amount of money, possibly $40,000 to him. And he had made statements that he wanted his money, that he wanted to settle, and possibly Remick decided to settle things on his own.
Police can't find Remick in the area. He has known drug connections on the West Coast, so investigators ask police there to search for him. But he's nowhere to be found. By late August 1994, Jamie Apaku has been missing for nearly 3 months.
It's extremely frustrating because you want something to happen. You want to get some information. You want to have a direction to go in, and you have nothing. It's like silence, you know, except that the case is standing there and it's louder than the silence.
Determined, Jamie's father takes another course.
Yes, this is Nita
He
Lee.
consults local psychic Nita Lee and asks if she'll meet with Detective Garrick.
What is the name of the detective that I'll be working
The psychic agrees. For Garrick, this will be a first.
His father calls me and he states that he would like for me to talk to a local psychic. On a case of this nature, where information is nil or none, you do what you have to do. So you go outside the box, or you color outside the lines. She tells me she felt that he was dead. She states that his body is northeast of the city. between the city limits and the state line. She also stated that there was a tin building or barn nearby the body, that there was a train track, and that a train went down the track every morning at 9 o'clock, that he could hear the train whistle at 9 o'clock in the morning.
I feel sure.
All interesting points,
His body there. I feel very
but not
strongly
specific
that
enough
we
to
will
follow up
find
on.
his body somewhere near those railroad
They'll
tracks
need more.
and that shed.
1,600 miles away, in Concord, California, a second psychic, Dr. Sally Heading, receives a letter from Jamie's father, asking for help.
I had the terrible sense that what he wanted from me, I wasn't going to be able to provide him with, and that was his son alive.
In 1994, 22-year-old Jamie Apaku disappears the same day his fiance's family is attacked. Police hear rumors that drug dealer Damian Remick is somehow involved, but they have no evidence. Jamie's father sends California psychic Sally Heading a photo of Jamie, hoping she can help.
Many psychics will work with a scarf, a ring, something, a piece of apparel that the murdered victim or the missing person had worn. I don't necessarily get into that, but a photograph is unbelievable. A photograph for me is as if when that photograph has been taken, there's a tiny little pinhole into the soul of that person in that photograph. Everything that I had sensed gave me the strong belief that his son had been killed, had been murdered.
She sees hitmen hired from the West Coast.
And I felt very strongly that 3 men had come in. It involved a deal gone sour. Someone had not done with money what they were supposed to, and that there was an order out to hit him.
Sally calls Detective Pam Gehrig right away.
Sally Heading told me she felt for sure that he was dead, that he was northeast of the city, that there was a gravel road, that there was a sign that had the word Hereford or cattle on it. There was a fence or something to do with cattle nearby.
Detective Gehrig recalls her talk with the other psychic, Nita Lee.
Both Nita Lee and Sally Heading mentioned that he was dead, and both of them said the body was northeast of the city. To me, that added a little bit of validity.
Sally believes the body's lying above ground, wrapped in a blue blanket. She also sees telephone lines and barbed wire with shreds of cloth attached to it. Sally is convinced the body will not be found by her or the police. She envisions deer hunters finding it.
Anytime you get information in an investigation like this, you need to either prove it false or prove it true. I don't care how off the wall it is. You really need to do that, even though you think you may be wasting your time. But I was willing to go anywhere, and I think any investigator would be.
The detective goes looking for the landmarks envisioned.
In the Northeast, there was an area such as they had described to me. I did find some land that had a train track, had a metal barn.
But the area is huge. A body could be anywhere.
I contacted the sheriff of that county, and he mentioned a mine, an abandoned mine in that area, and said he would check it out and get back with me.
A search of the mine comes up empty. Another dead end. By October 1994, there are still no breaks in the case, and Jamie's family grows increasingly anxious. His father pleads with Sally to fly in for another reading.
The police haven't had any success with finding it.
Sally is reluctant.
Now, my reticence on going on site was not that I was uneager or unwilling to help anyone. I didn't believe we would find him. In fact, I told the detective, the homicide detective, over the phone, he will be found by deer hunters, and they will happenstance come across his body. But I agreed to fly in. I have a steadfast rule on a crime case that I am met at the airport by the homicide detective, no one else, that he is in plain clothes, that he has an unmarked car, that there is no media attention. I don't want the chaotic energy of media attention. I don't want any news coverage that I'm coming in town or anything that's going on, because it's too disruptive. I said, I'll tell you what, you get me into the boundaries of the city, I'm gonna tell you where to go.
Sally envisions the killer's going to dump the body.
They wanted to be far enough away to cover their tracks, so to speak, but I don't think they were willing to travel for hours. I didn't get the sense either that they really knew where they were.
As they continue northeast, Sally feels they're getting closer.
And I said, keep going, we're on track. We arrived at a ranch, and it had the kind of drive that I had seen. It was kind of lightly gravel dirt, and there was a gate, like for cattle or horse. The kind of land, everything, the terrain is exactly what I had seen in my mind's eye when I was on the phone with the father.
They're close to where the body is, but it's not right here. Something is missing.
There wasn't that metal sign of the Herefords. And I kept telling him, there's someone in this area who is breeding prize Herefords, and there is that metal sign with a Hereford on it. You can see the sign from where he's lying.
Sally's sure Jamie's body is nearby, but she always said she herself wouldn't find it. Unfortunately, Sally has to return to California that afternoon. The detective offers to take her to visit Jamie's family before she goes.
I was extremely touched, and I said yes. I felt very, very privileged to be able to hug them all, give them my condolences, let them know that I'd done everything I could, and that they had done nothing wrong, that their son was not bad, that he'd just gotten lost, and to please hold on to that.
After Sally leaves, authorities get permission to search the vast ranch she brought them to.
The two deputies that rode on horseback were looking for fresh graves, a body, be it above ground or below ground, any disturbance in the terrain at all. They found nothing.
Another month passes. Then, in November 1994, more than 5 months after Jamie's disappearance, 2 hunters tracked deer northeast of the city, in the area where Sally Heading said the body would be found. The psychic was right. In the Midwest, Jamie Apaku goes missing for 5 months, until hunters discover his body, as predicted by psychic Sally Heading. Authorities note the victim is wrapped in a blue blanket, also consistent with Sally's vision. The head is wrapped in duct tape.
This seemed to me like an execution. And from the information I had prior to that, the drug involvement, maybe one person owing the other person money, I just knew that this was a crime. 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 I I felt like it was very feasible that if he had been killed, it would be an execution-type killing.
Nearby are landmarks Sally and fellow psychic Nita Lee described.
Some of the information was almost eerily correct. Across the road, there is a large tin barn. There is a train track. There was a sign that had cattle on it and said Hereford. There was barbed wire near where the body was recovered. There was a gravel road, and this was northeast of the city. There were bits and pieces of what both psychics told me that were confirmed. I mean, however you want to look at it, these things were there.
A medical examiner determines Jamie Apaku died from head trauma, asphyxiation, and blood loss from a slit throat. But there is no link to whoever killed him. 2 months later, another break in the case. When investigators develop an informant, according to Detective Dan Evans.
I believe that he was prompted by the fact that he was currently in jail on an unrelated charge and was hoping to garner some sort of benefit if he assisted in this ongoing homicide investigation.
The informant confirms there was a feud between Jamie Apaku and drug dealer Damian Remick. Remick owed Jamie money and didn't want to pay. A deal gone bad, like Sally Heading predicted. The informant says Remick recruited 3 thugs from the West Coast to come into town and intimidate Jamie into backing off. 3 men from the West Coast were also part of Sally's visions. According to the informant, in June 1994, Remick and the out-of-town thugs met to plan the attack. Jamie showed up unexpectedly. The informant says Remick wanted to make sure Jamie was dead and cut his throat. He agrees to testify.
Any detective enjoys reaching a disposition on his case that where his theories are proven, where his speculation and conjecture is found to be more than that. It's found to be actual facts from good detective work. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that.
Local investigators reach out to West Coast police, who quickly find Damian Remick and arrest him for the murder of Jamie Apaku. They also arrest Remick's 3 accomplices. All 4 plead guilty to second-degree murder and receive 10 years in prison. 2 of the accomplices confessed to the attack on the family of Jamie's fiancée, earning 5 to 10 more years behind bars.
I was just thankful it had come to a conclusion for this beautiful family. I don't think a family could be in any more pain than that family was in. You could not be around these people and not cry. Their pain was that infectious. It was palpable, it was terrible. And also, I think more than anything else, I'm delighted that the people who did this can't do it anymore. That's the good part. That's the really good part.
In the Midwest, police and a pair of psychics did all they could to finally get justice for Jamie Apaku and answers for his family. 1,200 miles northeast, another psychic has a nightmare that lends focus to a complicated search. In 1993, in Lebanon County, Pennsylvania, detectives respond to the scene of a possible homicide. Earlier, a family member reported the man who lives there, Mark Arnold, was not answering his phone. When the first officer arrived, he discovered Arnold in a pool of blood, a shotgun wound to the chest. Detective Paul Zekman finds no weapon nearby and rules out suicide. But there is a trail.
There was a series of footprints as if someone would have stepped over the body and walked to the rear of the room, walked around and returned back. So there was a series of at least 12 to 14 footprints in blood.
They must be the killers.
There did not appear to be a struggle at the scene. It appeared that the gunshot was from close range. Based upon that, my gut reaction was that whoever committed the homicide knew the victim and they felt comfortable together.
And whoever did it is long gone. Over the last 20 years in Lebanon County, only one murder has remained unsolved. Tonight, Lebanon detectives are not about to let another killer get away. On the outskirts of an eastern Pennsylvania farm town, police find a man shot to death in cold-blooded murder. No witnesses, no apparent motive. 62-year-old Mark Arnold died of a single shotgun wound to the chest. Point blank. Shortly after midnight, a telephone rings. One of many in Arnold's unusual phone collection.
It was a member of the family wanting to know what was going on.
Detective Paul Zekman has to give them the terrible news, but can't answer all their questions yet.
We instructed them that we were processing a crime scene and that we would get back in touch with them within the next several hours.
Police run a DMV check to identify Arnold's car, which is missing. They advise all units to be on the lookout for the car.
It was our opinion at the time that the vehicle had been taken by whoever committed the homicide.
By now, the killer could be hundreds of miles away. The next morning, Zekman heads out to interview the victim's family and employer to learn more about Mark Arnold.
He was characterized as a loner, but he was a family man and a caring person. He had contact with his children on a regular basis.
Arnold lived alone on the outskirts of town, on a property owned by his employer. He seldom had visitors, except for one acquaintance who sometimes stayed with him.
This person was Bob Wise. We understood from our interviews that there had been a falling out between the victim and Robert Wise.
Arnold had complained that Wise was always looking for handouts, mostly food and cigarettes.
What the hell are you doing over there?
Several times, Wise broke in and helped himself. The friendship was over. Arnold even filed a police complaint against Wise, accusing him of breaking and entering, theft and check fraud. But at the time, officers couldn't locate Wise. He has no permanent address. Now Zekman issues a nationwide alert for Wise and for the stolen vehicle. To prepare for any later trial, Assistant District Attorney Deirdre Eshelman visits the crime scene.
My county detectives collected evidence for about 2 weeks, including taking the linoleum up off the floor, because there had been footprints found through Mr. Arnold's blood on the floor. So those footprints were going to be very important.
The prints might place the killer at the scene of the crime, if police find a suspect they can compare them to.
Cut this section out, get it back to the lab.
Robert Wise is the most likely suspect.
The problem is we didn't know where he was. He wasn't in Lebanon. He was driving a car that we could look for, but where did we look? And the more time that goes by, the less evidence that you can find when you finally find the defendant. So the case was getting cold.
Yet the police are not alone on the case. In a way, there was a witness to the murder. On the night of the shooting, psychic Jan Helen McGee was awakened by a vivid nightmare.
I remember having the dream, and I could see the structure where he was killed. But I just remember being terrified, just like any nightmare. You're just terrified. I feel like I'm sort of just floating in the air, sort of moving around the room, watching them just briefly. It's like I go in and out. The victim had 20 to 25 phones spread all around. One of his phones was plugged in, and I came to the realization that he would talk to the man who killed him on that telephone on a regular basis.
Hoping it was just a dream, she went back to sleep.
And then the next day, I had this voice in my head that said, go buy a newspaper and buy the Harrisburg paper for some reason, which I usually didn't buy because I live in Lebanon. It's just not something I did. This voice said, buy the paper. I bought the paper. Right there was a picture of the building from my dream.
Jan Helen's husband urges her to call the police.
To me, it was like being at the scene of a crime and you're the only witness. You have to go, even though you know that your life will change, you know that you're going to be unhappy and miserable when you have to talk about it again and that you have to acknowledge it, but it's just so much the right thing to do.
Hello?
This is Janice Helen McGee.
At first, Detective Zekman is skeptical.
I had a dream last night, and I'm calling about.
But when Jan Helen describes all the phones and says the killer's first name is Bob, he listens more carefully.
This wasn't information that was out in the public. It was not information that was in the media, in the newspaper. It piqued my interest, set up for her to go out to the crime scene itself and just to see what kind of feelings or vibes she would get at the crime scene.
Jan Helen has had the gift of clairvoyance since childhood. But this is her first visit to the scene of a murder. And she is not prepared for the violence she is about to see. In rural Pennsylvania, after Mark Arnold is gunned down, suspect Robert Wise vanishes.
Look at all those phones.
Detectives bring psychic Jan Helen McGee to the crime scene, hoping she can sense a lead to the suspect's whereabouts.
It's very eerie to be on a site. I wasn't feeling very good because it makes anybody sad. It's very sad.
When she sees the telephones that appeared in her dream, she gains confidence. She tells Detective Paul Zekman she sees the two men on that night.
I just saw a person that had passed from this life. But it's not really a ghost. It's almost like a vision of a person. You know, it's almost like what I think angels really are. They had shared a meal before he killed him. It seems so sad to me because the victim had made food for his friend, and then his friend killed him.
Jan Helen knows where the men were standing when the man named Bob pulled the trigger, and where he walked after he fired. It's enough to convince Zekman that she has psychic powers, but it becomes too much for Jan Helen to handle.
So then I had to get out of there. Because when I get real upset, I can only go so far. Then I need a rest. To me, the information that I give to detectives is like a jumble, and it's not for me to figure out how to make that jumble work.
What Zekman really needs to know is where can he find Robert Wise. The psychic believes Wise fled southeast to a beach community on the mid-Atlantic coast.
At the beach. And then I said it's either Ocean City, Maryland, or Rehoboth Beach, Delaware.
She was the first one to mention these areas and the potential that Robert Wise was there. Based upon what she told me, I started reaching out and making phone calls to various agencies down in the Delaware and Maryland area.
Zekman learns of a recent burglary on the Delaware coast. A woman complained a friend robbed her. The friend's name, Robert Wise. Zekman and a Delaware state trooper team up to chase the lead and interview the woman, Rachel Miles. She says she met Wise at work at a beach motel near Rehoboth, exactly the area the psychic predicted. But one day, he stole all of her jewelry, valued at over $12,000, then disappeared. Rachel never heard from Robert Wise again, but she knows where he went. A friend told her Wise recently showed up at her house in Ocean City, Maryland. Zekman heads further south to Ocean City, the other beachside area mentioned by Jan Helen.
I felt like it was a beach that he had gone to as a child, and that beach made him feel safe. Because when you make a pilgrimage on vacation every year to the same place, that place makes you feel safe. So I felt that he was nervous and upset and scared, and so he went to a place where he would feel safe.
Zekman and a local detective tracked down their friend, Mary Ann Coster, in Ocean City. Mary Ann lives with her two sons. She explains one of the boys met Wise the summer before, when they both worked at a beach hotel. A few days ago, Wise suddenly appeared and asked if he could stay a couple of nights, according to Detective Mark Tempert.
When Mr. Wise initially showed up at the family residence, the two brothers were the only ones there. He had stayed there for several days, and then the mother had shown up.
Excuse me, who are you?
Who are you? Basically, she came into contact with Mr. Wise and realized that he was just a freeloader and promptly told him to leave.
The son explains Wise had a strange habit of backing his car into the driveway, so the rear plate could not be seen from the street.
The one brother found Mr. Wise's behavior to be odd enough that he actually wrote down the tag number on the vehicle.
It belongs to Mark Arnold.
We were able to determine that Mr. Wise was definitely at some point in time in the area. We were a couple of days behind him.
Detectives find other Ocean City residents who say Wise invited himself in
Why you got a gun in my house?
and brought a sawed-off shotgun into their home.
I can understand why it may be a little unnerving where an individual would show up at your residence and at some point in time bring a sawed-off shotgun in. And that's probably why they finally asked him to leave at 11 o'clock at night and say, you know, your welcome's up here, please leave.
Law enforcement agencies in the Delaware and Maryland beachfront communities are on high alert. Robert Wise is still out there, on the run, armed with a sawed-off shotgun and determined to stay free. Thanks to the work of psychic Jan Helen McGee, investigators tracked suspected killer Robert Wise to the beachfront communities of Delaware and Maryland. Now, area law enforcement agencies are on high alert. They distribute a photo of Wise and a description of the stolen vehicle he's in. Millsboro, Delaware police officer Patrick Quigley was a rookie at the time.
I was contacted by the chief of police from our neighboring town, and he briefed me on some details of a BOLO or an alert that they put out to be on the lookout for a particular vehicle.
The chief warns that Wise might be armed with a sawed-off shotgun. Everyone must be careful. Not 15 minutes later, Officer Quigley spots a car that looks like the one Wise took after the murder.
When I first came up on the vehicle, there was a brief moment of panic. We had been told that this person might be armed with a shotgun. I was working by myself, and being a new officer, I'd only been on the road for a couple of years. You know, there was some anxiety.
Quigley begins to approach, but remembering his training, the young officer stops. He can't rush in.
I backed away and literally got binoculars out and looked at the license plate on the vehicle, and come to find out it was the vehicle we were looking for.
Quigley notifies dispatch that he's got the car.
Pennsylvania license plate 433-481.
The dispatcher calls for backup and advises Quigley to stand by. Within minutes, a local officer and an undercover state trooper arrive.
At the time, the officer from the neighboring municipality, he and I were both carrying shotguns. So we pretty much, I think without saying, knew that the trooper was going to be the one that tried to open the door because he had a handgun and had a free hand.
They still can't tell if anyone is inside.
When the trooper opened the door, he rolled over and looked right up at me, and there was some fear in his eyes, and I'm sure as much fear as I had, and he slowly put his hands in the air and said, "I'm not moving."
It's Robert Wise. But the driver's license in his wallet belongs to Mark Arnold, the homicide victim. Quigley finds another Pennsylvania driver's license with a suspect's real name and photograph. Police recover a sawed-off shotgun from the back seat of the stolen car. Thankfully, Wise didn't use it when confronted.
The groceries that Mr. Arnold had bought with his paycheck the day he died were found in the trunk of the car. We found the gun that was used to kill Mr. Arnold in that car. And we found shotgun shells that matched the shells used to similar variety to kill Mr. Arnold in that car. So we were lucky that he hadn't gotten rid of any of those things.
Delaware State Police book Robert Wise at the nearest barracks. They collect his boots and clothing as evidence for Assistant District Attorney Deirdre Eshelman.
The things that were most compelling to the jury were the footprints.
An FBI laboratory determines that Wise's boots match the bloody shoe prints left at the crime scene.
Without something like that, how could I have proved that this defendant was in that house at all? And now we found him with the boots on his feet, so it was great.
Shoes, socks,
Robert Wise never admits to shooting Mark Arnold.
Please put that on.
But the physical evidence convinces a jury that he is guilty of second-degree murder. And the judge sentences him to life in prison plus 12.5 years. This was the first time Detective Paul Zeckman used a psychic in a murder case.
I don't know how psychic works. I know how psychic worked in this particular case and how it affected what I did. But I am a true believer that I will use whatever resource I can that will assist me in my investigation in order to apprehend the guilty party, and that's what we did in this particular case.
If the information was able to help the investigation along, help steer investigators in the right direction, all the better, because the more time that you're wasting chasing down leads that are of no value whatsoever, the more time the suspect is using to distance himself from law enforcement.
Jan Helen McGee is glad that her remarkable psychic powers have been put to good use. But the nature of her abilities is something of a mystery, even to her.
The gift that I have can't be touched or proven. To me, it's like love. You can't prove love. Somebody can say, well, how do you know you love her? Well, you just feel it. It can't be touched, it can't be proven, but it's real.
Real or not, psychic evidence is still not admissible in Pennsylvania courts.
You know, 20 years ago when I started, DNA wasn't admissible. Polygraphs are still not admissible in the courts in Pennsylvania. So who am I to say that at some point psychics won't be admissible? It doesn't matter to me whether it's admissible in court. It matters to me if it helps us find good evidence that we can use to convict someone in a court of law. And whether that's DNA, polygraph, or a psychic, if it leads me to evidence that I can use for a conviction, I'm willing to do it.
I gotta go.
One young man killed by the criminal crowd he fell in with. Another man gunned down by someone he once called friend. Neither thought it could happen to them, but it did. And so determined police and talented psychics worked together to put their killers away.